Thank you very much. Uh, I really appreciate the privilege of being involved with this conference because I have an ongoing research project I'll be speaking about, looking at entrepreneurship within the MENA region and how game-based learning could definitely have an impact on what is taking place with the Agenda 2030 SDGs. Part of the triggers for my presentation are the number of crises going on, the number of organizations like the World Economic Forum indicating significant risk in the region. And of course, most of us are aware of COVID-19, but VUCA itself, the whole area of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that is actually gripping the world. It's not just affecting the MENA region. Another set of triggers is the incredible investment and effort made by many of the countries in their national visions to be able to make changes to be able to conform to the SDGs for 2030. And of course, for me, one of the more significant elements of the UN Sustainable Goals is Target 4.4, which is to increase the number of people with relevant skills for financial success. And of course, entrepreneurship is mentioned as one of the critical success factors. I also put out a paper last year on radical change taking place in higher education across the globe because of the pandemic. And this contributed as well to the reason for my presentation and paper. My personal interest is the fact that I've been involved in game-based learning for probably the last 30 years, long before it became popular. And in 2019 published a text which apparently has become an interesting touchstone for many people on how to integrate games, simulations, serious games, card games, role-playing games into the classroom, both at the undergrad, graduate, and doctoral levels. And in fact, I've provided a number of workshops even to faculty to help them learn how to make fun to engage their learners, because critical engagement and commitment by the learners is waning significantly, especially during COVID-19. During the early months of COVID-19, I tracked a number of different blogs, and the number of complaints coming out by learners that their professors were boring, that they were expected to listen to 3 hours to a bloody lecture. All of these things contributed a great deal to disengagement by the learners. And, you know, many of the professors were just reacting to the fact that they'd never taught online before and were just struggling to get some course material up there. So for my study, I had to look at very, very significant and different definitions for all of these phrases, because all of them will contribute to the ongoing study I have in the MENA region. My macro hypothesis is really that entrepreneurship education is the foundation across all the SDGs. In every country, we can see occasional rises. We see a lot of countries that are staying at the same place that they were at, and real integration of entrepreneurship in many of the different schools would have a significant impact in 10 years on these countries. I have taught as a member of the Center for Entrepreneurship in a university and have taught a number of courses both in leadership and in teamship and entrepreneurship. And I can tell you that experiential education, especially in terms of using game-based learning, provides a capability for the learners to do double loop learning. They can learn about what they've learned about. And this is a reflective approach to learning, which helps and has successfully created in many of my learners a true entrepreneurial spirit to continue after the university period. My micro hypothesis is that certainly within the MENA region, games could become a significant instructional method to keep the learners engaged, for them to learn while they're having fun. I mean, one of the biggest challenges I had with my traditional professors around me in the business school was they would come into my office, they'd see all these games and Lego, and they would say, how is it that your students can learn while they're playing and having fun? And my response always was, well, isn't that where you started, in a sandbox somewhere, having fun? That's how you did learn. What happened? And what we've forgotten is that reflective learning within the university setting, because it's done a lot in corporate settings, has a very rich history in religious and spiritual reflective practices. Many of the spiritual communities really invest heavily in this area of the body, mind, spirit, soul continuum. And many of our universities has lost this perspective. Much of it is about wealth generation within the entrepreneur, when in fact a balance is required. For example, in the Eastern mystery tradition, the whole integration of soul, spirit, heart, and mind is incredibly important. In the Western mystery tradition, much of the early writings in, let's say, alchemy and Rosicrucianism was about body, soul, and mind, and the integration of these in a balanced individual. And that those who increase their effort in this area will become the new leaders. So currently I have a number of research questions I'm using to drive my study. And it's really about investigating where game-based learning has been integrated into entrepreneurship education. And by the way, entrepreneurship education, as Dr. Amir had mentioned in her science and technology area, is not limited to business schools. It can be in the arts, as I've seen in Saudi Arabia, where they're teaching at a women's university how to develop games. And it can be in the sciences or the social sciences. So I'm currently carrying out a very systematic review of the different websites of universities throughout the MENA region, as well as a literature review of people who have published about what they're doing within their courses. So the whole foundation is around experiential learning. Before I taught in my entrepreneurship faculty at university, the learners ended up listening to people lecture about entrepreneurship and lecture about how to build a business. Well, that just doesn't rate it. When you go out into the workplace, the first thing you're presented with is the fact that practice is the basis for learning about entrepreneurship. So I've been able to apply a number of different reflection models in my game-based learning courses. And those are based on affect, behavior, and cognition. So having the learners write about an experience they go through from the perspective of how did it affect your emotions, how did it affect your behavior, and how did it affect the way you think about the way you think. And deeper reflection produces this double loop learning in the learners, where they learn about how they learn. But it can only be based on going through experience. So in a number of my courses, I would use this type of rubric to talk about asking them to express how did they feel, what have they done with their experience, and what do they think they learned from the experience. And it became actually revolutionary for many of them who have kept in touch with me, because this is one of the areas they specifically remember. When they had to blog or write 2 or 3 paragraphs around their emotions, around their behavior, and around their way of thinking after a particular educational experience, this was the key course for them on learning within their whole undergrad business or MBA curriculum. They said they learned more in this one semester about themselves and how to change themselves. So I want to open up for dialogue at this stage about these kind of ideas. I'm very interested in learning from other folks about particular courses or curriculum that might be taking place in MENA that would correspond to people experimenting with game-based learning. Thank you very much.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.